When construction began on the Rockefeller Center's RCA building in 1932, John D. Rockefeller Jr. became heavily involved in the building's design. At the time, he wanted large murals covering the interior and, for the lobby wall of the RCA, a massive 63 by 17-foot mural. Rockefeller's wife, Abby Aldrich Rockefeller, was herself a patron of socialist Mexican artist Diego Rivera, for whom he was commissioned to create the lobby masterpiece. Amid great economic turmoil, with the Great Depression beginning just several years prior, the general public's confidence in the economy and society as a whole was at its lowest. The idea of creating inspiring, optimistic art was one that would, hopefully, inspire the public to rebuild. The enormous painting by Rivera, Man at the Crossroads, was intended to depict the social, political, industrial, and scientific possibilities that came about in the first decades of the 20th century. While the Rockefellers had full knowledge of Rivera's socialist activities, they hired him anyway, feeling as if he could best reconstruct the art's desired theme. Man at the crossroads looking with hope and high vision to the choosing of a new and better future. In Rivera's mural, contemporary social and scientific culture were clearly depicted, and the work became a three-paneled piece. Depicting a worker controlling machinery, with a giant fist holding what appears to be an orb of some technological prowess, the crossroads are intended to meet at mankind's hand. Surrounding the orb and man are four elongated ellipses, stretched to the corners of the piece, and within each were cosmological and biological forces being depicted. This included exploding stars, forming galaxies, cells, and eventually the emergence of complex life. Between these ellipses are other depictions of essential ways of modern living, such as wealthy social women playing cards and smoking, soldiers and war machinery, and gigantic figures, including the Roman god Jupiter, contemplating the scene. At top right, a Russian May Day rally was depicted, representing, for Rivera, the contrasting social visions of the debauched rich as they're watched by the unemployed. At the bottom, the painting shows the controlled growth of natural resources, with plants emerging from their roots. And finally, on the right side of the painting, Vladimir Lenin is seen holding hands with multiracial workers, further underscoring the painting's socialist theme. With the central panel flanked by two pieces of art, the frontier of ethical evolution at right and the frontier of material development at left, Rivera intended to respectively depict socialism and capitalism, with man at the center depicting the, quote, literal intersection of these two ideals. Once approved by the Rockefeller family, work began on the mural without depictions of Lenin or the May Day parade. However, published on April 24, 1933, the New York World Telegram complained of its anti-capitalist propaganda, and Rivera defiantly responded by adding the portrait of Lenin and the parade, which were not in the mural's original sketches. Though the Rockefellers did not express any initial visible concern, seemingly unaware of the additions, Rivera ensured no trace of Lenin would be in the fresco's blueprints. It would have likely gone unnoticed too, except for a mistake by a workman who dripped some paint on the mural. This demanded the piece's inspection and thus the eventual discovery of Vladimir Lenin in it. When found, Nelson Rockefeller delayed the May 1st unveiling and wrote to Rivera, requesting the removal of the more socialist editions, to which Rivera refused. The artist even offered to add Abraham Lincoln and other possible portraits, including Nat Turner and John Brown, but these were declined. When asked about why he refused to remove Lenin, Rivera said, quote, "Rather than mutilate the conception of the mural, I shall prefer the physical destruction of the conception in its entirety, but preserving, at least, its integrity." As work on the mural continued on May 10, 1933, Rivera and his assistants were scrutinized throughout the day by onlookers in what Rivera called the Battle of Rockefeller Center. By the end of the day, though, work was ordered to stop, and the piece was covered over. The mural's concealment itself was controversial, with artist John Sloan, writer Lewis Mumford, and photographer Alfred Stieglitz supporting Rivera's position. By February 1934, the artwork was peeled off the wall and plastered over by order of Nelson Rockefeller before it could ever be finished. In its place, the mural American Progress, the Triumph of Man's Accomplishments Through Physical and Mental Labor, was installed, painted by Joseph Maria Sert just 3 years later. In reaction, many artists vowed to boycott future exhibitions at the Rockefeller Center. Despite its removal, however, Rivera had black and white photographs taken before the mural's destruction, when he first suspected it may be destroyed for its socialist views. Using these photos, Rivera actually repainted the composition under the variant title Man, Controller of the Universe. This new work went on to include Leon Trotsky, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Charles Darwin. The final piece was painted on a blank wall in the Mexican Palace of Fine Arts. The significance of the artwork lies in its controversy over communist ideals, especially in contrast with the wealthy Rockefeller family at the time. The dispute has become an emblem of the political, aesthetic, economic, and creative relationships of power, and has gone on to inspire a number of works reflecting on the incident between the Rockefellers and Rivera. Despite the controversy, Nelson Rockefeller still admired Rivera's work, and the two actually had an amicable relationship after the events. Man at the Crossroads is a marvelous work in a genre I call Industrial Humanist Art, which depicts humanity at its technological and societal peaks. Many other artworks like Rivera's exist, often in a deco style. Rivera himself actually painted a similar piece just a year prior in Detroit, titled the Detroit Industry Murals. A series of 27 fresco panels, the work depicts industry at the Ford Motor Company in Detroit's Rouge complex. After spending 3 months touring and sketching the plant and its workers, Rivera was amazed by the plant's technology and modernity. Surrounding the interior of Rivera Court at the Detroit Institute of Arts, Rivera considers the murals to be his most successful work, and because of the rigorous 8-month schedule to complete them, he lost over 100 pounds during the project. On the north and south walls, the largest 2 of the 27 murals are displayed, showing laborers at the River Rouge plant, and are considered to be the climax to Rivera's narrative. At north, a worker is shown in the center, manufacturing a 1932 V8 engine. It explores the relationship between man and machine, to which, in an age of mechanical production, the boundary between the two was blurry. On the southern wall, a fresco shows the manufacture of exterior automobile parts, emphasizing technology as an essential quality of the future. Other panels around the court depict advances in science, medicine, and technology. The piece also gained notoriety and controversy for its socialist and Marxist themes of the Great Depression, which disrupted American faith in the economy and industry. Some condemned the piece as blasphemous, vulgar, and un-American. At its unveiling, some were so offended by Rivera's work that they demanded its destruction. Finally, in the 1950s, a sign was erected by the Detroit Institute of Art that reads, "Rivera's politics and his publicity-seeking are detestable. But let's get the record straight on what he did here. He came from Mexico to Detroit, thought our mass production industries and our technology wonderful and very exciting, and painted them as one of the great achievements of the 20th century. This came after the debunking 20s when our artists and writers found nothing worthwhile in America, and worst of all in America was the Middle West. Rivera saw and painted the significance of Detroit as a world city. If we are proud of the city's achievements, we should be proud of these paintings, and not lose our heads over what Rivera is doing in Mexico today." Other artists also contributed to the industrial humanist genre, including Jose Clemente Orozco with his 1932 to 1934 piece, The Epic of American Civilization. A social realist, Orozco painted this mural in the basement of Baker Memorial Library at Dartmouth College. Covering 24 fresco panels, the principal themes included the impact of indigenous peoples and European colonists on North America, as well as the impact of war and rapid industrialization on the human spirit. Painted at the same time that Rivera worked in his Rockefeller murals, Orozco was not limited in his work as Rivera was, though Orozco's images offended several Dartmouth parents known as the Boston Mothers, who wrote to Dartmouth President Ernest Hopkins. Hopkins defended Orozco. In response to the Boston Mothers, Hopkins said, "There are 100% Americans who have objected to the fact that we have employed a Mexican to do this work. But I have never believed that art could be made either racial or national. If being nice is a criterion for judgment, many of the great works of the medieval masters would have to be removed from the Louvre." Even earlier artworks exist in the industrial humanist genre. In 1920, Fernand Léger created his work titled The Builders, which depicts the machine age and the effects of modern technology on a changing society. By depicting workers' bodies as assembled from standardized industrial parts, Léger conveys his belief that all modern life was succumbing to the machine. In 1922, he wrote a letter saying, the contemporary environment is clearly the manufactured and mechanical object. Another piece by Thomas Hart Benton titled America Today was created between 1930 and 1931. His 10 canvas panels provide a panorama of 1920s American life and are based on Benton's extensive travels throughout the country. With the onset of the Great Depression and the election of President Franklin Roosevelt, many initiatives were put in place to revitalize the American economy, including the Works Progress Administration. Federally sponsored, the WPA aimed to create what they called New Deal murals as part of Roosevelt's New Deal. From 1935 to 1943, the WPA ran the Federal Art Project, which was a U.S. visual arts program and the largest of the New Deal projects. Not only was it created for cultural activity, but it was also a jobs program for artists and artisans. With over 100 art centers established throughout the country, some 10,000 artists and craft workers created approximately 400,000 paintings, murals, prints, posters, renderings, and other artworks of the project's 8 years' existence. Many works of art emerged from this program that reflected industrial humanist art styles, including the New Deal architectural reliefs. The reliefs were several pieces by notable artists that were created for the Federal Art Project, and these include Paul Manship's 1934 Prometheus, which is displayed at the Rockefeller Center, as well as Michael Lance's 1942 Man Controlling Trade. Another famous work that came out of the WPA was Helen Lundenberg's History of Transportation, a huge mural, 240 feet long and composed of 60 panels. Helen's pictorial history of Centinela Valley and Inglewood begins with the Gabrielino Indians and continues through the valley's history, from walking to horses and carts to rail and finishing in the 1940s with the aerospace industry. The valley's diverse methods of transportation are on full display. As one of just 3 female artists from California for the WPA, Lundenberg's piece resonates as an important work in the industrial humanist genre. Industrial humanist art tends to focus on social ideals, depicting humanity as an equal, almost one-minded species. In Rockwell Kent's Workers of the World Unite, Kent uses the wood engraving as a cover for the 1937 issue of New Masses, a prominent left-wing publication. Known for his activism in socialist causes and politics, Kent championed workers' rights and their role in society, and in this piece he depicts a young man swinging a shovel against raised bayonets while the fires of revolution roar in the background, emblematic of workers' struggle against the excesses of capitalism. Kent in his piece expressed solidarity with the working class, while also emphasizing the individual's role in fighting oppression. To conclude this video, I felt that the 1939 New York World's Fair, with its theme of the world of tomorrow, was a proper closing subject. As the new middle class emerged with the onset of the 1940s and the ending of the Great Depression, an industrial designer named Norman Bell Geddes conceived and oversaw the construction of General Motors' Futurama exhibition at the World's Fair. Titled the Metropolis City of 1960, the modernized city model was originally built for Shell Oil's 1936 City of Tomorrow model. Described by Lewis Mumford as the great egg out of which civilization is to be born, it's arguable that the Futurama exhibition did more for the envisionment of the modern American city than most other ideas at the time. Known as a pioneer of American industrial design, it's ironic that Geddes' Futurama exhibition, once heralded as so futuristic and ideal, may now be the cause of the problems we faced with the interstate highway system, which unnecessarily cuts through otherwise civilian-oriented, walkable cities and fails to promote efficient public transit. There needs to be something to promote the enjoyment of our ability to conceive a better world. In essence, I argue that we need federally funded programs again today. When organizations such as the WPA, including the Federal Arts Program, as well as groups like the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Public Works Administration, and the Civilian Works Administration, and laws like the National Relations Labor Act existed, I genuinely believe that we were better as a society. Fair wages for workers, encouragement of social promotion, and the intelligent and creative creation of art and technology improved our society as a whole. By recreating and promoting such federally funded programs, we not only could bring out the best in new generations through boundless opportunities, but also inspire self-improvement by fostering creative, intelligent, and skill-based options. It is my opinion that, with something that advances societal and cultural progress, a new and better tomorrow can be created.